Welcome to the Learning League podcast, where the most influential minds in learning assemble. This is a show that challenges the way we think about leadership and professional development. Today, we're shifting the focus to something often overlooked in the hustle and bustle of executive life: leadership wellness. Because the health of a team often starts with the well-being of the person leading it. Today's guest is Dr. Tabitha Perry-Farmakis, a board-certified OBGYN turned wellness coach and founder of Beneficial Nutrition LLC. Her journey from high-pressure hospital corridors to the world of holistic health is a powerful reminder that learning doesn't stop with degrees. It deepens through experience, reinvention, and personal transformation. When burnout came knocking, she didn't just change careers. She redefined what it means to care for yourself while caring for others. At the Learning League, we believe the most influential minds in leadership are those who evolve. Dr. Perry-Farmakis brings a unique blend of medical expertise, nutritional science, and lived wisdom to help ambitious women prioritize well-being without sacrificing success. Today, she joins us to explore how sustainable wellness, radical self-care, and intentional living can reshape not only how we lead, but how we live. Welcome, Tabitha.
Hi, how are you? I'm so excited and happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. We're excited too. This is actually the first time we're covering wellness. So I'm actually excited to get into some of these topics that we're going to talk about that you've transitioned into from the hustle and bustle of the hospital corridors. So you made a huge transition. Why don't you take us back to the beginning and, talk about what first sparked your interest in medicine?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my story is not the conventional one, I guess. I grew up a military brat, moving around from base to base, and my parents eventually settled and bought their first home in Maryland. But still with that kind of development of some sort of stable ground, I still had that military experience in my background, right? Now with that comes opening doors, opening your mind, and not being fearful eventually of doing things outside of your comfort zone. So I think that part developed very young in my life.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did notice too is that when I was young, people, for whatever reason, would often say, you should be a doctor. And in particular, for whatever reason, still to this day I don't know, they would suggest you should be a pediatrician. So when I eventually went down that path, I initially thought that's what I was going to do and quickly realized that that was not it, right?
Yeah.
So when I was younger, I kind of took and soaked all of that up, like in an osmotic form, just kind of went in, stayed there. And when you're young, you're impressionable, and you also don't know what to look for. Right? You don't know what options for you exist unless someone tells you, or you actively have the wherewithal to kind of search that out yourself, which is not always the case when you're a young-minded person. So I think that made me sort of close the door for things that I potentially could have been amazing in. When I look back at certain things and talents that I had, I could have been an architect, I could have been a businesswoman back then. There could have been many things, but I was so hard pressed in the medical career that that's the route I took. In hindsight, was it the right choice? Based on how things worked out and have made me as successful as I am now, yes, I think that it was. But I will admit that during the process of the change, it felt like such a wrong turn that I took early on that I was trying to rectify, right? But now that the change has been rectified, I see through the blinders. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm now in that light and things are looking up and they're fantastic. So that's kind of how I got to this whole medical field to begin with. And within that, of course, there were trials and tribulations. Medical school is not easy. Success and picking and deciding what suits you once you even are going to go into the medical field is a whole other task on its own. And within that, you're still trying to find out who you are and where you fit in amongst everyone else in the world and everyone else in your sector, in your specialty, in your corridor that is just as smart as you, that is just as talented as you. So you are competing against people that have the same wherewithal, the same ambition, the same drive, the same education that you do. And for some people, that makes it a little bit more challenging to find their own identity within that. So the start and the development of things that can ultimately lead to burnout later on, once you have reached your goal of being a physician, doctor, business person, whatever, starts early. And you don't even realize that it's there.
Don't even realize it. So what experience, caused you to shift in your thinking about where you belong?
Well, I realized during the early stages of my career, post-residency, that a lot of things that we really needed to learn, we did not learn in residency or in medical school. And I'm talking about just real life things and how you integrate your career and the lifestyle of medicine and healthcare into your own individual world, right?
Okay.
It's all about caring for others, taking care of others, learning knowledge, gaining that knowledge, and showing people that you have the knowledge. But in reality, the things that are crucial to be a successful adult, successful person, are often left out of the equation. Things that are very simple in hindsight. Contract negotiations, learning and understanding insurance, understanding a holistic approach to treating and managing your patient, understanding how nutrition and food intake can not only help treat, but prevent things and help people maintain good health. All of that. I mean,
no curriculum for that.
None. And granted, people are making strides today to improve that, but how many years has it gone on where it wasn't there?
Right.
There's a lot of doctors coming out now that are behind the boat, and there were definitely doctors behind the boat when I was there, and when my teachers were there, and when their teachers were there. It's a perpetual cycle that just takes forever to change with the culture. So when I started to realize that in the early stages, I was like, something ain't right. But at that time, you don't want to think that maybe you don't fit there. You want to think that the source, the outside influence, is what needs to change, despite the fact that psychologically, you cannot control that, right?
Right.
How am I, as one person, going to change everybody's mind in the field of medicine and how everybody does things, right? All the traditions, whether or not I agree with them or I don't. And in reality, you can't. So then you have to say to yourself, what are you doing there? And are you doing what you think you need to do in that space? And if not, how are you going to change that to get to that? So I kind of had a subtle mindset with little pieces of this whole equation coming into play as I went through different stages of my life. I tried to initially change things by changing my setting, by moving, changing jobs, thinking that.
So you were going as a hospital administrator at one hospital, then you went to another hospital. Were you still in the same role?
No, so I started off essentially just a typical OBGYN attending physician, and was still that when I took on the other roles that were offered to me that were leadership oriented. And that's often how it is in medicine. Certain roles, when it comes to directorships and chairpersons, those people are often practicing physicians who someone saw something in them that made them think you would be a good candidate to fulfill this role and take on this responsibility.
I see.
So
in addition to your workload.
Exactly. In addition to your workload. without
Mm.
you realizing or recognizing that that
Mhm.
also means taking away from the time you have outside of that workload.
Yes. No
Yeah.
work-life balance.
No work like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And
Mm.
if you're someone like I was and you're still trying to figure out where you fit, you end up having these gaps and these holes that instead of getting replaced with positive things that can lead you to that answer, you instead fill it up with work-related obligations and responsibilities, thinking that that's going to change the path and make
Right.
things become okay, but it
Right.
doesn't. And that was a hard lesson learned.
So that's how it led to burnout? Is that when that
Absolutely.
happened? Okay. All
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
So now burnout really shifted your professional journey. How
Absolutely.
did that how did that happen?
I think that for anyone who has a pivotal change and point like that in their life, like myself,
Mhm.
you reach a point where the scales turn, the scales tip significantly, and the
Mhm.
pain, whether or not it's mental, emotional, physical, whatever, that you have in a specific situation or setting becomes greater than any pain or difficulty that you could experience trying to make your transition out of it. That
Mm.
fear, all of that becomes less than the
Hmm.
pain you're experiencing. So you have no choice but to do
Yeah.
something about it or stay in that pain. And I reached
Yeah.
that point where those scales tipped and it was no longer worth it. I couldn't tolerate that anymore and something had to give. And
Yeah.
it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, especially when it happens later in life and you've acquired education, things like that, to kind of think, maybe I need to get more. Maybe I need to transition to this. Maybe I need to start not living the lifestyle that I was living for a short period of time so I can then
Yeah.
accommodate these new goals. It's a bit of a
Yeah.
adjustment to say the least, but if done
Yeah.
properly,
And
highly
that's a
successful.
change in mindset. You mentioned mindset earlier. You had to adopt a whole new mindset, I'm sure.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It was a
Yeah.
mindset where I finally put my thoughts first, my needs first.
Hmm.
Whereas before, and just based on the nature of what it means to be a healthcare provider, we are
Right.
always looking out for someone else, right?
Right.
So we tend to take that and utilize it subconsciously or consciously in
Mhm.
other aspects of our lives, and that can be to the detriment of ourselves. You
Yes.
begin to feel guilty when you are not staying late or working on charts or what have you, you know? When in
Yes.
reality, taking care of your child at home is just as important. But that
Yes.
guilt sometimes is there. So you have to figure out how to relinquish that guilt and put yourself first. And it took a
Yeah.
bit of time to do that,
Yeah.
but once you've done it, you can do it unapologetically and make
Yeah.
good decisions for yourself.
When you stepped out of your comfort zone into wellness and coaching, what first of all, why was that stepping out of your comfort zone? Like, how was that? And then, what did that look like for you as far as your life changing?
Yeah, yeah. Definitely a step out. And one of the main reasons is I think that in general, because of the vagueness that sometimes exists with the idea of coaching, there's a bit of misconception for a lot of avenues about what coaching is, you know?
It's
Even
true.
if yeah, if you look on social media, people are calling themselves life coaches, this coach, that
Yeah.
coach, and all they're doing is telling people what to do, you know? They tell you what to do to get your life in order and in check. And that may be a temporary solution, but what are you
Right.
gonna do when that person's not there? Because there's gonna come a point in time
Yes.
when they're not there, right?
Yeah. Or you run
So
out of money.
exactly, exactly. You run out of money, run out of time, and then you're back to square one, right?
Yes.
So one thing I had to do is get fully educated on what the world of coaching truly was. And it was
Right.
eye-opening to me, especially when
Mhm.
I found out it's about manifesting and encouraging that internal motivation that people have. And that motivation, that process to make them think of solutions outside of the box, or think of solutions with someone else beside them that maybe they were having a difficult time doing with on their own, that alone breeds more likelihood of sustainable change and success. So that's something I had to make sure I learned and understood to even follow this role successfully. My goal was not to be, I'm going to tell you what to do. That was not my goal. And to this day, that is not my goal, you know? So that was one of the main things I had to do to get myself ready for that. And of course, with the extra added things that I do with my business, the culinary aspect and nutrition aspect, that also requires additional education.
Talk a little about that. I think that's a unique twist that we need to hear more about, in addition to your wellness and coaching. It's just so unique.
Absolutely. Like when it comes to the field of medicine in general, people are slowly trying to get to the point where we are emphasizing prevention, right? And emphasizing maintenance of good health. And with that comes eating right and lifestyle changes that lead to a healthy outcome, right? So when it comes to the nutrition portion, it's learning key things about specific foods that you eat and learning exactly how those things can benefit you. And oftentimes you'll realize that once people have that little bit of knowledge, they're more likely to move towards those healthier alternatives because they're looking for something to get from it, right? If I just tell you,
I see what you mean.
Yes. If I just tell you, hey, you know, you should eat more blueberries, get you some fiber. That's great. But is that really going to be something that maybe sticks with them and make them do it? Maybe, but likely.
Maybe.
Right?
Probably not with me.
But you know, if I tell you, you know what, blueberries, they have all these antioxidants. They can help with your skin. They can help with your overall health, your cardiovascular status. They can help with a lot of things, aging. Once you give people those things that are natural pain points for them as humans, then they're like, maybe I should reconsider those blueberries, you know?
Right.
It's like that.
Now that makes sense. Would be much more motivated that way. And so, so then you would give me sample recipes using that item if I was interested.
Absolutely. One of the things that I do with my programs and my coaching is, as an example, someone is looking for food items to help fatigue, right? Something to give them energy boost, things like that. I make sure they have some knowledge about some key ingredients that may benefit from, that they actually enjoy to eat, mind you. That's important too. And then if they desire, I can provide recipes for them so that they can actually find a way to get those things into their diet. And with the coaching, say, hey, let's think about what you're eating during the day. Let's see how we can work this in successfully into how and what you're eating. So those two kind of naturally go together, right? The coaching creating healthy habits and the solutions to work in healthy habits. And then of course, nutrition, just knowing more about it and having the motivation to follow good guidance and get good intake. Those two go hand in hand, without a doubt.
Yeah. So in the coaching, are you having them track any type of wellness, you know, cues or what they eat or anything like that?
Yes, I am. And it's actually tailored to what their respective goal is. Because some people come to me not necessarily for nutrition goals, but also for maybe exercise, social interaction, any sort of personal demands or stress relief, burnout avoidance, those kinds of things too, right? So what we do is we establish well-defined goals that fit within their overall arching vision of how they see themselves or how they want to see their ideal self. And when you break it down like that, you can then develop these fundamental, achievable goals that are time sensitive, that have a way of acknowledging success with them, that they can then accommodate and follow through with ease. And part of the ease is because they work to help develop those goals. You, as the coach, don't tell them what those goals are. That makes all the difference.
Yeah, I actually do that. Emphasize that in my leadership training. I just make sure they understand the difference between facilitative and directive. You're not telling them this has to be done by September 1st, right? You're actually encouraging them to provide different paths to reach that goal and different solutions. So it's a partnership.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you?
And that's
go ahead, of course.
No, I was just going to say that's exactly what coaching is. It's a partnership. But the difference is, it's a partnership, but you are in the driver's seat. It's as if you are in a race car and you are sitting beside them in the passenger seat. So you're both in the car, going to the same place. You're then helping them navigate.
Only one person is driving.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, quick question. Now that you're walking in your purpose with wellness and coaching, how's your work-life balance?
Much better. That's the short answer. Much better.
Good.
With the change, like I said in the beginning, there was that fear component that you have to get over. But once you do that, you start to feel more grounded and more confident in decisions that you make, more confident in your path, your approach, and setting your boundaries so that you can get there, to avoid going back to the state that you were in before. That's one of the most important things. So I feel very much more in tune to who Tabitha is and what her identity is and how she fits within this space. Yes, I'm an OBGYN. Yes, I help women and women's healthcare, but that's not the only thing that I do and the only thing that I am. I'm also a wellness coach. I'm a gardener. I'm someone who loves to cook. I'm highly educated. I'm a wife. I'm a sister. I'm a lot of other things. And now I truly know what it means to be all of those things. Whereas before, I think I was focused solely on being a doctor.
Right. Wow. So, when it comes to supporting wellness in the workplace, let's just switch gears for some of our listeners today. What do you think companies are still getting wrong when it comes to employee wellness?
Yeah, that's a bit of a loaded question, right? So it is, right? Like people are making strides. But I think what they're getting wrong is that underlying intention, that underlying tone of it truly at the end of the day being for their benefit is still there in everything that they do, right? So as an example, companies have team building exercises, all of those things, which have scientifically, statistically been proven to increase performance, productivity, etc. Great, got it. Imagine how exponentially better that would even be if the people that were there truly felt happy outside of work, just for the sake of being happy outside of work, not for the sake of being happy because work wants them to be able to do more work, right? People can smell that a mile away, and companies don't give people enough credit to be able to spot that. They're not going to tell you. Employees aren't going to tell you. They're just going to have high turnover. They're going to have people that are a little bit unhappy, people that may be shopping for another job on the side and don't tell you. All that
That's
stuff is
right.
going to go on behind the scenes because people know when that's taking place and when it's not. So if they would just get back to, let me make sure you're okay for the sake of you being okay, I think that they would do so much better
As
in
a
the long run.
human,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
It's so funny because I used to work for a company who had this morning meeting, and it was a little sheet where you go through the projects and talk about what's on time, what's not, whatever, whatever. And at the very end, they have everybody rate their work-life balance. And and so the funny thing is, while they were asking us to do that, at the same time, they were doubling the workload, shortening the timeline for us to finish the work, and calling and emailing at 7 o'clock at night while we're home.
Crazy.
There was
Crazy.
such a conflict between those two. I'm like, how can you enforce work-life balance when you really don't care about
Exactly.
how I'm feeling as a person and being able to, handle all this, and you're invading my personal time at home. It
Exactly.
was just
Mhm.
so, yeah. So I totally, I get
It's
that.
like the hypocrisy in that people can spot. And for whatever reason, companies somehow think that we can't, when they forget that they are made of people. It's not, they're not an
Right.
entity without people.
That's right. Exactly. And like you said, they don't know until, the person puts in their resignation or whatever.
Exactly.
So, what's one small shift that you believe leaders or professionals could make that would have a big impact on employee well-being?
Ooh, very good question. I can sum it up in saying this: get out of your comfort zone. And
Okay.
that in itself is a multi-layered answer. The
Mhm.
reason I say that is because not only do you individually have to get out of your comfort zone and be open and willing to hear other ideas and talk through other ways of achieving things, but you have to get out of the traditional culture of whatever avenue of employment or whatever sector you're in, right? Like we spoke about earlier, the culture of medicine has a lot of things that were traditionally taking place that weren't always the best things. But because
Mhm.
that's what people thought you should be doing when you were a resident, or you should be doing as a physician or a medical student, they continued and perpetuated that. It wasn't until more recent times people were finally standing up and saying, you know what? We need to kind of let go of this traditional way of doing things and figure
Mhm.
out more innovative, more effective, and more appropriate and harmless ways of doing things that match with the time that we're in now.
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend companies, especially if your company has been around for many, many years, you know,
Mhm.
you may have something that worked before, but this is 2025. You are going to need to sit down and see whether or not it's working the same way as it did 20 years ago. And I
Yeah.
would bet that it's not.
Yep.
Not. So if you really want
Yeah.
to make that shift, change things up a little bit and listen
Yeah.
to the people that are beside you in that office or in that space, for sure.
Yes. Listen.
Mhm.
It's so funny because somebody told me the other day they hadn't had a review in 5 years. It's not funny. It's terrible. But it's just when you said listen, that was like the first thing I thought of. It's becoming a trend where
Mhm.
there's just no sit downs with
Mhm.
employees anymore. So let's wrap this up with talking about your cause. You have a very special cause that's very meaningful to you, and it actually supports your mission. for your
Absolutely.
wellness and coaching. What's that about?
Yeah, so one thing I realized, especially as a woman getting into her 40s, is that as you age, it becomes harder and harder to maintain and rekindle and establish new meaningful friendships and meaningful social
True.
interactions, right?
Very
It's,
true.
right? It's extremely difficult, and it's something that people don't talk about enough. We just
That's true.
assume that it's the same for everybody else. Everybody else is fine. Everybody has all these friends. No, there was a point where I looked and I was like, I don't know if I honestly have a best friend anymore. I
Yeah.
don't know if I have a core group of people anymore. So I need to figure that out.
Mm.
And I realized that once you kind of reach a threshold in adulthood and age, your success with achieving that becomes something that requires more intention, right? More deliberate action, right? When
Yes.
you're younger, you are immersed around those people, usually because of the settings, the environments that you're in. College, high school, things like that, camps, whatever the case is, right? Group activities, things that put you naturally with people that are similar to you,
Yes.
that will naturally gravitate toward you so that you can develop
Mm.
those friendships. When
That's
you're an
right.
adult, that goes out the window, right?
It's true.
You have to be direct and intentional in trying to get that again. So one of the things that I have done recently is I started a meetup group called the Beneficial Women's Wellness Collective. It's a DMV based, Virginia, Maryland, DC based meetup group. And we
Oh,
actually have coffee hours. We have dinners at unique venues so that women can get together to develop those friendships again, to kind of talk to each other. We're not just going to drink coffee, or we're not just going to have a meal. We're actually going to talk about our lives and talk about each other.
mm.
And during some of these sessions, especially our coffee hours, we go over wellness questions, things to get us to know each other and develop connections and integrate. And from that, people can then easily or more easily develop the skills that they need to actually improve their friendships and social lives, and even come out developing friendships with the people that they meet during these activities and these events.
Right.
So, because I know, like I said, firsthand,
Wonderful.
thank you. Firsthand, you gotta get those social interactions. They are so important and too often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've used meetup.com, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. I've used Meetup several times. When I moved to this area, I had a women's group where we went to dinner, we went to the museum, we went to a Broadway show. So, yeah, it's really a great site.
Thank you.
That's
I agree.
wonderful.
So far, I think we've developed some great connections. I've met some wonderful women with
Yeah.
such cool backgrounds, just interesting people who have wonderful hearts, and we're all looking for the same thing. We want those friendships, and we're building them as we go. So,
How important is female friendships to your health?
oh my gosh, social relationships in general are significantly important. Because think about it, how you function at work when you're having a fight at home, any sort of social interaction, right? Think about how different it is when you feel supported at home. You feel nurtured. You feel like you had someone to talk to. You feel like you had someone who understood you and respected your opinions unconditionally. Someone who could listen to you babble and say anything on your mind and not look at you like you had 10 heads, right?
Yeah.
Having that in your corner mentally makes it easier for you to process and focus on the other things in your life that are out of your control. Things
Yeah.
that like work environments, etc., right? So those social interactions are highly important. And having stressors because of toxic ones or ones that aren't suiting your needs can also negatively affect your health, right?
Yes.
It's added stress, mental, emotional, physical, right?
Yes.
So your relationships and the quality of them are highly important. That's whether or not you're a man or a woman, or whether or not the person you're in
Yes.
a relationship with is a man or a woman. The
Right.
quality of them, of those
Yes.
relationships, is highly important. Highly important.
I know that also you said over 40,
Yeah.
probably like late 40s or 50. That's when a lot of us lose our mothers. And my mom, I don't know about everyone else, but my mom was my best friend. And we talked sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. So she knew everything about what was going on with who, what, where, when, how. And so I guess that's another thing too that your group, can help with is women who have lost a parent who was their best friend or relative, or, but I'm just speaking of mothers, but, that can really leave you with this void.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, having that friendship with other women, it's so important.
Absolutely. One of
Yeah.
the best things that I think that we could all do and make sure that we maintain as we get older. Because like I said,
Mhm.
it's easier to lose that when you're older.
Yeah. Well, this has been so insightful. I think that leaders, professionals, business owners, like there's so many groups of people who could benefit from this conversation. I hope that everyone recognizes that burnout is real, and really tries to prevent it with different wellness tips, whether it be from a coach or their doctor or nutritionist, but definitely take it seriously.
Absolutely.
That is our time, everyone. We'll have all of Tabitha's information in the description area below the video. So be sure to check that out. And thank you so much for joining us today, Tabitha. It's
Thank you
been a
for having me.
pleasure.
It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Everyone, that's our episode for this week. Until next time, bye.